Welcome everyone. In the video today, we'll be looking at the RSI, the Relative Strength Index indicator, and how it can be used to find stocks that may be oversold or overbought. The RSI is without a doubt one of the most popular indicators out there and has been around for nearly 50 years at this point. Today, we'll be going through the basics of how the study is actually calculated, some practical examples of how you guys can use it to find both buy and sell signals, and towards the end of the video, we'll go through creating a custom scan to actually find those stocks that meet our buy or sell criteria right now. To begin with, let's first discuss how the study is actually calculated. The RSI study is calculated using the average price gains and losses over a certain time period. That default time period is typically going to be 14 periods, which if looking at a daily chart would be 14 days. If we were to take a closer look at the calculation itself, you'll see that RSI is equal to 100 minus 100 divided by 1 plus RS. RS being the average gain divided by the average loss over that time period. Now, of course, RSI is the confusing part of this calculation, so let's take a closer look at that one and explain it in simpler terms. Simple English we can actually understand. In order for us to calculate the average gain portion of that calculation, we'll need to look back the past 14 trading days and see how many days the stock moved up for the day. We'll then find out how much the stock moved up in value during those up days, add it all together, and then divide by 14. That'll give us the average gain over that time period. Next up, in order to calculate the average loss, we'll then do the exact opposite. We'll look at how many days the stock was down in the past 14 days, add up the total points lost during those down days, and then divide by 14. Once we have both the average gain and the average loss calculated, we'll then take the average gain, divide it by the average loss to come to our RS figure. Once we actually plug RS into our calculation, RSI will then spit out a number somewhere between 0 and 100. Now, traditionally, anytime that RSI value is greater than 70, the stock is said to be overbought, whereas anytime the value is below 30, the stock is said to be oversold. Now, luckily for us, none of us actually have to remember any of that formula. Every platform out there will do the calculation and plot it on the chart for us automatically. So now that we've reviewed the actual calculation for the RSI study, let's next go over how we would actually add it to our charts within thinkorswim. Like all indicators within the platform, in order to add them, we'll simply come up here to the studies icon in the upper right-hand corner of our chart. Go ahead and select that. From that studies menu, we'll then be able to see all of the preloaded studies within thinkorswim over here on the left-hand side. To find RSI, we'll simply come up here to the search box. We'll then type in RSI. We'll find it in the list down below, select it, and hit Add Selected in the lower left-hand corner. Once added, we'll then see that RSI gets added as a lower study on the right-hand side of that window. We then have the ability to edit some of the parameters or the appearance settings by clicking on the gear icon on the far right-hand side. This settings menu will then allow us to change some of the actual parameters used to calculate the RSI study or change the overall appearance of it the way that it looks on our graph. Looking up here at the very top of the parameters window, we can see the time period that we currently have selected, so 14 periods. Right below that, you can see the current overbought indication is 70 and the oversold indication is 30. So if you guys needed to change any of the parameters, this is where you would do it. Besides that, if we were to scroll down just a little bit, we can see the overall appearance settings. In this example, we're going to go ahead and change just a few things. I'm going to come down here to the width of the line, make it a little bit thicker, easy to see. I'm going to come over here to the oversold indication, which is currently a tealish color. I'm going to click on that and make it green. The last thing I'm going to do is make my oversold and overbought indications a little bit easier to see. So coming up here to oversold first, we'll come down, make the line thicker. I'm also going to make it a bright gold color. So remember, this would be the oversold indication or the 30 line within the RSI. I'm then going to come up here to the overbought indication and do the exact same thing. Once I'm happy with all these settings changes that we made, I'm going to come down here and hit OK one more time. Once added, we can then see that RSI populates as a lower study right below my chart, and as we mentioned before, RSI will always populate a value somewhere between 0 and 100. You can also see there those bright yellow horizontal lines are our oversold and overbought indications. And remember, traditionally, anytime that value is greater than 70, the stock is said to be overbought. Anytime the value is below 30, the stock is said to be oversold. So now that we've actually got the study on our chart, there are a few different ways that we could use this to actually find our buy or sell indications. The first of these methods is by finding those areas within the study that indicate a stock is in an oversold or overbought territory. So remember, that's when it crosses above or below the 70 or 30 line. From there, once the RSI crosses back up above or below that 30 or 70 line, that then triggers a buy or sell signal. If we were to use the current stock I have pulled up as a practical example, right here you can see it cross below the 30 line somewhere around January 25th. If we wanted to take a closer look at that, let's go ahead and zoom in on that time period. Right there, if I hover my mouse over it, we can see that AMD crossed below oversold territories, it looks like on January 24th. Looking a little bit further to the right, we can see it then cross back up above that 30 line on January 28th, and that would have been our potential buy signal. So to see it a little bit better, let me go ahead and highlight that spot. Right there on January 28th would have been our potential signal to get into a long position on AMD. If we wanted to use another stock as an example, let's come over here to Amazon. Go ahead and select that. Looking here to the right-hand side of the chart, you can see that Amazon crossed below oversold territory here on January 19th. Moving our mouse to the right, we can see it was still oversold all the way up until January 28th when it then crossed back up above that oversold line. So right here on January 28th would have been our potential indication to buy the stock. If you guys wanted to see the reverse of this or find a potential sell indication on this chart, let's go ahead and zoom out on Amazon. Looking over here on the left, we can see around, it looks like July 6th, Amazon crossed the overbought signal. So here from July 6th all the way over to, it looks like July 13th, Amazon was in overbought territory. Here on July 13th, we can then see that it crossed back below the overbought indication, and that would have been our potential sell signal right here. Let me go ahead and highlight that. So again, that was the first way that you can use the RSI study to find potential buy or sell signals. The next way traders may use the RSI to indicate a potential buy or sell is through a bullish or bearish divergence. This one is a bit more complicated and will happen far less frequently than a simple oversold or overbought indication. Bullish divergence occurs when an oversold reading is followed by a higher low that matches a corresponding lower low in the stock price. This indicates rising bullish momentum, and a break above oversold territory could be used as a trigger for a new long position or a potential buy signal. If we wanted to find an example of this, let's come up here to my little search box and we're going to go ahead and pull up WIN, W-Y-N-N here. From there, the very first thing we need to do is find a time period on the chart that it was either oversold or overbought. Looking down below, we can see that WIN did reach oversold territories back on August 3rd, and quickly after that, it actually recouped and crossed back up above oversold territory, but then unfortunately a few days later crossed back below the oversold line. However, looking there, you can see the angle of that line or the value of that RSI was not quite as dramatic as it was in the previous drop. However, looking up here at the top of the chart, you can see that the stock was actually at a lower level during that time period. So if we were to draw a trend line there, you guys can see the angle a little bit better. And then the angle of the RSI, this would be a potential bullish divergence, a period of time at which the stock price continued to reach lower lows, whereas the RSI actually inclined in value. Looking here, if I were to zoom in a little bit more, our potential buy signal would have been right here when it crossed back up above the 30 line for the second time. Now, the flip side of this, a bearish divergence would occur when the RSI creates an overbought reading followed by a lower high that matches a corresponding higher high on the price. So the exact opposite of what we just went over. Using another stock as an example, let's come up here and type in Airbnb, A-B-N-B. Just like before, we do need to find a time period at which the stock price was either at overbought or oversold territory. If we're to come to the center of the chart, you can see that it reached overbought territory here around November 5th originally. You can then see that the stock did sell off, crossing back below the overbought line, but then quickly after that, it crossed right back above the 70 line, and it actually reached a new higher high in the stock price. However, looking down below at the RSI indication, you can see that it did not reach quite as high of a value as the previous precipice right here. This would be a potential indication of a bearish divergence, and zooming in a little bit, our potential sell signal would have been right here on November 16th when it then crossed back below the overbought indication. So if I were to highlight that right here, this would have been our potential sell signal right here on the RSI study. So now that we understand how the RSI is calculated, a bit more about how it works and how to interpret buy and sell signals, let's next go over how we can create a scan within the Thinkorswim platform to actually find those stocks that meet this criteria. In order to do that, the very first thing we need to do is come up here to the Scan tab at the very top. From there, just make sure you've got the stock hacker selected. Looking down below, we can actually see 3 pre-made stock filters right at the very top, and we will actually use these here in just a minute. But the very first thing I want to do is actually create the scan to find those stocks that are oversold or overbought. And in today's video, we're going to specifically create a scan that will find those stocks that have had a recent crossover after being either oversold or overbought. So to do that, we're going to come over here to the right-hand side and select Add a Filter. In our case, this is going to be a study filter. You'll then see a new filter box pop up down below, and right there it says ADX crossover. We'll just need to go ahead and select that, and then down below we can see all of the pre-made studies that Thinkorswim makes for us. But in our case, we need to come down and select the custom filter box. You're then going to get a little pop-up window where we can then actually create our custom filters right here. In my case, you can see the default is ADX crossover, and the first thing I need to do is go ahead and delete that out of there. I'm then going to come down in the lower left-hand corner and add a new condition. For this first filter, the first thing we're going to say is that we want to look for stocks that were recently either oversold or overbought. So what I'm going to do is come up here to select a condition. It's going to be a study condition. I'm then going to type in RSI in the search box up at the very top and go ahead and select it down below. Looking here, we can see our default parameters are exactly what I want to use. Right here it says 14 periods, 70 and 30 are oversold or overbought. For this first one, I'm going to be looking for stocks that were recently oversold. So right here, I'm going to change this to is less than, and I'm going to select a condition. It's going to be a value condition. And remember, oversold is below 30. So I'm going to change this value to 30 right here. I'm also going to say that this could have been within the last 2 days on a daily chart. So I'm going to change this from 1 bar to 2 bars. Now that I'm happy with that, I'm going to come down here and hit save. So now what I've essentially created is a scan that's looking for companies that were recently oversold or were below 30 within the last 2 days. Now, in order to finish that off, what I next need to do is say not only had it been oversold in the last 2 days, but it's recently crossed back above oversold within the last day. So coming down here, I'm actually going to add an additional condition. I'm going to come up here and select a condition. It's going to be a study condition. I'm then going to search for RSI just like before. Find it in the list, go ahead and select it. I'm going to leave the parameters exactly the same, 14, 70, and 30. This time I'm going to come over here to the right and select crosses above. I'm then going to select the exact same condition, a value condition, and put 30 in here once again. This time I'm going to say within 1 bar. So essentially what I'm now saying is within the last 2 days it was oversold, but within the past day it's now crossed back above oversold territory. It's reached my buy criteria. So now that I'm happy with that, I'm just going to come down here and hit the save button. And now that I've got both the parameters that I like, if I were to move this up a little bit, you now can see the OK button in the lower right-hand corner. I'm going to go ahead and select that. From there, I now have my custom study, which is looking for that buy criteria on the RSI. If I were to hit scan right now, it's only going to show those companies that meet my buy criteria on the RSI. So looking down here below in the search results, there are actually 183 companies in the stock market right now that meet my buy criteria, at least looking at the RSI indicator. Now looking here through a lot of these stock tickers, I probably would not trade a bunch of them. A lot of them, first off, don't have any liquidity. Maybe they're not really even trading anymore. So what I'm going to do is add a couple basic filters to weed out some of these results. Coming up here to the very top, the very first stock filter, I'm going to go ahead and change that to the word last, which is just for stock price. I'm then going to say the minimum stock price I want to trade is going to be $10 a share. I'm going to put $10 in this box here. I'm next going to come down to the volume box, and I'm actually going to change that to, let's say, market cap and millions. And for me personally, I don't like to trade any companies that are less than $1 billion in value, which would be 1,000 millions. Now, finally, the very last filter I'm going to add is actually not going to be this one. I'm going to come up here to the add a filter box once again. I'm going to add another study filter. I'm going to come down here to the new study filter we just added, and it defaults to ADX crossover. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. From there, I'm then going to come down to one of these pre-made filters, and this one specifically is going to be for volume. I'm then going to select the average volume filter, and I'm actually going to leave it as the default. Now, the default right now is saying over the past 50 days, the 50-day average, this stock has typically traded over 1 million shares a day. Now, 1 million shares a day is not a crazy amount, but it's at least fairly liquid. So now if I were to come down here and run the scan again, you can now see that the results are far more limited. We only have 9 results now in the entire market that meet our criteria. So looking here, we can see that Match Group meets our criteria today, Intellia Therapeutics, and a few others right below that. Now, just to confirm that they actually do meet our criteria, let's take a look at EXPI. So I'm going to come back up here to the charts page, type in EXPI up here, and right now we're not actually at the current day, so let's go ahead and zoom out. And you can see that it does actually meet our criteria as of right now. So it was near oversold territory, and it just recently crossed back above oversold, so our buy signal. If we wanted to take a look at another one, just to confirm, let's look at Match Group, MTCH. Let's go ahead and throw that in there again, MTCH. Again, looking down below there, we can see that it was oversold, and just recently within the past day, it crossed back up above the oversold line, meaning our potential buy signal right here. Now, another cool thing about creating scans is if we were happy with this and we wanted to use it again in the future, you could always come up here to the 3 little lines in the middle, go ahead and save this as a scan query. For me, I'll go ahead and name it my RSI scan and hit save. Once the scan is saved, I can actually come over here to my side panel, and let's actually just add another watch list here down below so I don't get rid of one of my other ones. I can then come over here to the name of the watch list, come up here to all of my personal watch list, and find the RSI scan that we just made. If we go ahead and click on that, that watch list is now only going to show me those companies that meet my criteria right now. So you can see there it finally populated, and this scanner is going to be constantly updating. This watch list is going to be constantly updating with only those companies that meet my criteria right now. But that should give you guys all a better understanding of the RSI indicator, how it can be used in a practical application, and how you guys can create a custom scan within Thinkorswim. If you guys have any additional questions for me or recommendations for other study you guys would like me to discuss, please leave them down below. But that wraps things up for today's video on the RSI. I hope you guys all have an amazing rest of your week, and I'll catch you on the next one.